Welcome into Unbreakable, a mental wealth podcast with Jay Glazer. I'm Jay Glazer. And look, I got, the purpose of this podcast is it used to be called a mental health podcast. But if we build our mental health, I realize that's mental wealth. That's the key. That's what we're going for here. So I try and bring on guests from all different areas of life. Haven't had anybody on yet who works at the NHL. Now I'm just tying it in here because forget the Dos Equis man. This guy's probably the most interesting man in the world. His name is George Mumford, aka the mindfulness performance whisperer. He has worked with the likes of the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson back then, and Kobe and Shaq with the Lakers as well, but also now the Edmonton Oilers with the NHL. And I'm just fascinated by this cat. And hey, if I can learn something from him, we can all learn something from him. And that's why we're here. George, thanks for joining me, man.
I appreciate that. I see that hardware you have behind you, man. Those are two of my favorite teams.
Oh, the Packers and the 49ers?
Back in the day, yes, yes.
You know what they are, actually? I got people always ask me, like, there's autographs on here. I've never asked for an autograph in my entire life. But my son, Sammy, when he was growing up, I adopted my son. And so I wanted greatness cheering him on throughout his life. So all my friends in the NFL, I got them to sign things to him. And not just a signature, but saying something. Something that could just cheer him on for the rest of his life. He's now 21, going to University of Arizona, and we just found these in storage recently when my wife and I moved. So it's pretty cool to see a lot of people I'm still really close with, but they've been cheering him on his whole life as it is. So it's pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to get into, first of all, there's so many ways to start. I guess we'll start here with the Edmonton Oilers, right? Stanley Cup team right here. You got brought in this year, but also you've done so much in the past. Kind of give us an overview of what you do for these teams that makes you so valuable, because I've been told that you're like the secret weapon for all these franchises.
Yes. Well, it's really simple. I wrote two books, The Mind for Athletes, Secrets of Pure Performance. That came out in 2015. And I wrote one that came out a year ago, May 2nd. And it's titled Unlocked, Embrace Your Greatness, Find the Flow, Discover Success. That's what I do. That's what I do with teams. Now, how I do it.
The how is what we got to get here.
How I do it, it all depends on what decade, what team, and
so let's start with the Oilers and work. Let's start with the Oilers and then work backwards. We'll go to the Lakers, we'll go to the Bulls, and some of the Kobe's and the Michael Jordans that you've worked with. But let's start with the Oilers.
Yes. So I got approached by Jeff Jackson, he became the CEO of hockey operations in August, and out of a whim he reached out to me. I think it was LinkedIn, and I responded to him, and he approached me and he said, I read Phil's book, 11 Rings, and then I read your book, and it occurred to me that the Bulls were in a similar situation that we were in, although they had already won 3 championships when I had gone there. They had the two of the best players in the NBA, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, and we have two of the best players in the NHL, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And he said, "I think you can help us win a cup. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh yeah." And so that's what I do. I help people find themselves, because to me, I feel that authenticity is more important than achievement. But when you're authentic, you achieve. When you're being true to yourself, and when you're doing what you love to do, and you're expressing yourself honestly, it's a game changer.
Right. So how are you able to, again, they bring you in, hey, you could help us win a Stanley Cup. What's the main thing that you do? And I know it's been a whole season. But
yes.
What can you teach like our listeners? But hey, this is what I really did. This really clicked and helped them.
Yes. Well, the first thing I do is I remind people that they have a masterpiece within, that they're wired for success. And there's a book called Born to Win, and they say we are born winners. And so all I do is maybe it'd be easier if I just tell you what my charter is. So I have a charter I developed, I don't know how many years ago. It could be, sometimes you think it's 10 and it could be 15, but one of the things I do is my idea is the release of the divine spark in each and every human being. We all have a masterpiece. We all have a divine spark. and my job is to help people unlock it or release it, however you want to call it. And the values that are at the heart of who I am are love, curiosity, truth, wisdom, integrity, selfless service, compassion, courage. That for which I could be counted on for is to be loving with a warrior spirit, with a serving and compassionate heart, pursuing excellence and wisdom with grace and ease. So that's the game I'm playing. So my idea is that whomever I'm working with, Yale or jail, locker rooms, boardrooms, doesn't really matter. Hockey, NHL, NBA, NFL, it doesn't really matter. MLB is really about helping the person be who they are. You know, their higher self, their divine spark, helping them to release that or unlock it. That's what I do. And so what's the process involved in that?
Yeah.
It comes down to really self-awareness, which when you understand you have self-awareness, then you have self-responsibility. You got to take responsibility for yourself and realize you make choices. And so what I do is I help people develop a quality of self-awareness that allows them to self-regulate. In other words, self-regulated thoughts, feelings, behavior. In other words, you are responsible, and I'm teaching you how to do that, how to access your masterpiece within, so you can express yourself honestly. Like I said, so unlock, embrace your greatness, find the flow, discover success. And so that's different for everyone. But the main thing is that there's a process involved in helping you to unlock.
So is it more of, all right, listen, you're not finding your potential and you're holding yourself back. So I'm going to show you what your bad habits there are and correcting that. So you work harder or more selfless or like, again,
Well, what happens is people come to me and they usually have some intention. Like if it's an entrepreneur or a CEO, everybody's interested in performance, interested in performing at an elite level or high level, or actually just being able to do things. And so if we go back to the turn of the century when Sigmund Freud was asked, why did he create or develop psychoanalysis? And he said, to help people work, love, and play at their highest capacity. And so people want that. People want to be able to live fully and creatively. They may not be able to express it, but people want to have a great experience. People want to have a feeling fully alive and fully self-expressed. And it can manifest in a variety of ways, but it's really about, like for me, if I look at my own journey, I was aspiring basketball player in college, a walk-on, and I got injured, and then I didn't know who I was, and so I struggled for a while, and then I got addicted to pain meds and other stuff. But it wasn't until my butt got on fire and I decided to take responsibility for myself, and I got in a process where I was able to start to be true to my own self. I started being able to say, okay, I am responsible. I make choices. And so how do I get to a place where I make wise choices predicated on what's inside me, not what somebody tells me I should be. My basketball coach in high school said that accountants make good money. So I got a degree in accounting. But after I got clean, I realized that I wanted to work with people and I wanted to help people unlock. I wanted to understand, well, I got clean, but there are a lot of other people that don't. What motivated me and how did I do it? And so for me, when I learned how to do it, I learned two things. Number one, if you want to learn something, you teach it. And number two, if you want to keep something, you got to give it away.
Like that.
So when people want a formula, and I'm saying the formula is no formula, what I did 10 years ago, or even 2 years ago, is different, but it's all predicated on myself and anyone I'm working with, self-awareness, self-regulation to get to self-mastery. That's what it is. And then once you get to self-mastery, now you got to get the other, this is all emotional intelligence stuff. Then the rest of it is social awareness and relationship development. That's it. Because we live in a network of relationships. So how do we relate to each other in ways that help us synergize, help us understand I and other one, help us do something great together? Because if you want to do something really great, you can't do it just by yourself. You need a community. You need others
to
support you. Yes, you need a team.
Right.
Yes. So does that make sense? I'm trying to be as succinct and clear as I can. So
you're like, hey, I'm talking to a D+ student here. Let me try and dumb this down as much as I can. And I appreciate it because I need it. Yes.
Well, I just want to communicate. I don't
Yeah.
judge and I don't say anything, but I know that if you keep it really simple, people can understand it.
So when you go in, you train the Oilers. Where is that different than if you train a basketball team? Just say this Oiler team as opposed to the Boston
Yes.
Lakers.
Well, every team is different. Well, it's a different context. It's ice hockey. And so the game is played differently, but at the same time, everything's similar in terms of people being able to be self-aware and self-regulate, and they might have different goals, but they have to have a process of how they're going to achieve those goals. But in the interim, what I preach, it's interesting. Maybe I'll just cut to the chase. I did a podcast with Tim Ferriss, and I did a podcast with Lewis Howe.
Yes.
The School of Greatness.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And
Good
they
friend.
both asked me basically, three things that I know for sure, something along those lines. And I answered the same way both times without knowing it. But when I listened to it, I said, wow, that's interesting. And so I said, and I believe this, the only time we have is now. The only person you can authentically be is yourself. And all you need is love.
I love that.
So that's as simple as I can get it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm doing some variety of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with, and it's interesting because when I was in graduate school studying psychology, one of the things that I learned from an existential perspective, which is ontology, the study of being, and this idea of being able to deal, potentiality and how you deal with the anxiety of freedom and fear of death and all of that stuff, meaning and isolation and all of those things. And I kind of lost my train of thought there for a minute.
So you got your degree in psychology.
Yes. Yeah. So I was studying existential philosophy and psychology. And one of the things I learned was one approach they had was Rollo May, and he wrote a book. I think it's Discovery of Being or something like that. And he talked about this idea that what we do is we get wedded to a certain technique or school, and then we apply that to the situation. And what he was talking about from an existential point of view is you got to get the insight first, and then you apply the technique to it. And so this is why Bruce Lee, he studied Wing Chun. He started out with that, but he studied all the martial arts, and he came up with his own system, which is Jeet Kune Do, which is the way of the intercepting fist. And what that really was, it was Zen, or this approach of contemplative approach to the situation where you don't know what the style is going to be. You read the situation, and then that's when you apply whatever you need to apply. And so that's what it comes down to. There is no formula. The formula is there's no formula, but the formula really is getting the insight and then applying the most appropriate, effective technique or process that you can apply. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. I'm gonna flip the script a little bit here, because I think all great coaches, you're there to coach people, but you learn from every experience too, right? Then you could then pass those along too. So what have you? Then we'll just go back. What have you learned from the Oilers being around an NHL team that was different than the past?
Well, I learned a lot. The main thing I learned is, when you think about the game is really fast. Extremely fast. And at the same time, the thing about ice hockey is, we talk about having talent and having the best team. Well, ice hockey is very different, because if the goalie gets hot, it doesn't matter how good your team is, or if you can bounce a certain way. So there's a lot of unpredictability in it, in terms of who's going to win and stuff like that. And so I learned that, but I also learned that I learned a lot about myself. Like you talked about, that's what I teach, because you learn from it, but you realize that under this context, it's just really challenging. You just got to figure out you got to understand, the context that you're in, and then being able to do the same thing, which I talked about. You have an intention on how do you develop that. So learning it from a different perspective and learning about the game and learning about the nuances and learning about the challenges that you have. But once again, it doesn't matter what context you're in. It's really about problem solving. It's really about embracing your greatness and finding the flow and then discovering success. And so it's an ongoing thing. And if I were to work with we'll come back and work with them next year, it would be different because everything's always changing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's certain things that are involved there. But just learning new people, learning like I don't know if it's a Canadian thing or whatever, but they're open-hearted people, and they're great people, and they're hungry, and they're humble.
Yes.
And so that's what I learned. And obviously Connor and Leon, but all the others, there's a hunger and there's a humility there. And so normally when you work with teams, you may not get as much success as we've had. It takes time. And it's still, and we're still in it, but at the same time, I think there was a readiness there.
Yeah.
Like they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. That's not just a teacher, that's a situation or whatever the lesson you need to learn. And so, so I just learned, what it feels like to be part of a family. And a lot of people say
cool.
family, but they mean it.
Wow. That's really cool. I love that.
Yes.
I'll tell you my experience with hockey players. I started a mixed martial arts training program for pro athletes in 2007. I'm mostly for football and fighters, but we've done some hockey players like Milan Lucic and Nate Thompson and Rich Clune, a couple cats. But those hockey players, they brought a whole bunch of guys in. Those hockey players, like football players, they'll try and get out of their work fast. They'll turn and see if you're looking and put their hands down, put their hands in their hips. They'll jump. Fighters never do. Hockey players, you could tell them to go hit a bag for 3 minutes, or just say, go hit that bag at noon on Tuesday. And you could forget you told them that and come back Thursday. They'll still be hitting the bag. That's the best way I can describe it.
That sounds about right.
Yep. Great work ethic. It's such a pleasure to be around. They're great.
Yes. Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, well, people don't realize, because it's interesting, because since I got here, I was watching practice. I watch it from the stands, and the games I watch from the press box up on the 8th floor. But during practice, I get down on the bench and I watch them at the ice level, and it is so fast.
Yeah.
The game is so fast. It's amazing that they can do what they do, because up there it slows everything down. And you say, well, why couldn't they do that or make a turn or whatever? Yeah. But when you're on the ice, you realize, man, this is a fast sport, man. And everything's quick, and you're doing it on ice.
And so reactionary, because you don't know where that puck is going to go bounce. So reactionary for them to be able to cut, like, oh yeah, they're next level. Their athleticism isn't appreciated.
Yes,
grander scale.
I would agree with that. Yes.
So all right. You again, we talked about you working with Kobe and Shaq and Michael Jordan, and so let's go back to those guys. And again, the biggest thing, let's say Jordan. What did the biggest thing you worked on with him? Because I'm sure your program was different back then than it is now. And what's the top thing you've learned from Michael Jordan? Yeah,
the main thing was I was explaining to him how he could do things and how he could take it to the next level.
Wow, really?
Yes, that's what it was, because before I met him, actually the name of my LLC is Eye of the Hurricane. And what I noticed about him from afar was that when things got, chaotic, he got more calm.
Mm-hmm.
He just had a way of being in that calmness and still being able to perform at a high level. And the other thing I realized about him that was unique, I'll just say, I roomed with Dr. J in college, Julius Erving.
Yeah, you roomed with Dr. J. Remember I said you're the most interesting man in the world?
Yeah.
That puts you up there. Like, and we definitely got to hit that. We got to hit. Yeah, I want you to finish on Jordan, but we're going back to Dr. J.
Yeah. So when I saw Michael, to me, he was acting like he was still trying to make the team.
And what year was that in the league for him?
Okay, so when I started working with the Bulls, it was 93. It was October 93. But he was around, but he wasn't with the team. You know, he was playing baseball, whatever.
Oh, okay.
He came back in 95.
Right.
You know, after 18 months, you know, that I had been working with the team 18 months, and he came back in March of 1995. And just watching him, and he didn't have his basketball legs, you know, that season,
Right.
that late in the season. But what I saw was the way he played and the way he practiced was no different. There was no difference. He was always coming at you, learning, and it was like he was trying to make the team because he got
Wow.
cut from his high school basketball team. So I guess he promised himself he would never, that would never happen again. But to me, that's a prime example of adversity leveling you up. No
Right.
struggle, no swag.
Being a gift. Yes.
He had a lot of swag.
Yeah.
So, and there's all these sayings like no pressure, no diamonds, you know,
Right.
pressure is a privilege. And so he embodied that. And even when I was working with him, it was interesting when he first came back, and you know, they used to come to Boston and I would work out with the team the day of the game, and I might take them through some physical stuff and some mental stuff and give them some concept. And I was doing the sun salutation with them, having them, you know, do the sun salutation. And he had hurt his hand, and he had a stim machine on his hand. And I said, "Oh, Mike, you don't have to do that. You know, this is," and he did it. He did it with, you know, it's like, "No, man, I'm doing this." It's like,
Right.
that is, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it was like, and he was curious, and he once again, he was humble and hungry. He saw what I was doing was going to help level everybody else up. But I think the true testament to our work together was when you watch The Last Dance, and he talked about how he loved that championship that they won, because he was learning how to play more spiritually, because he didn't have the physical gifts that he had before, but he was still really good. But he realized that being able to be in a moment and to be able to, because see, if I would have been working with him when he first came in, because he spent a lot of time in his hotel room, he couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
And so, but he got what I was teaching him, and he got how it helped him with his leadership style and everything else. And it was just, but I was explaining to him, because sometimes we do things, but when you can do something and you understand what you're doing and how you do it, it makes it easier for you to keep doing it and actually go to the next level. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you know what? I loved, you know, the being in the moment part. I think he had a line in The Last Dance where somebody asked if he was nervous to take a shot. And he's like, "Why? I haven't taken the shot yet." Or he was nervous to miss, right? And he's like,
"Yeah.
Why would I be nervous? I haven't taken the shot yet."
Yes.
Which is kind of exactly what you're talking about. Be in the moment and not worry about something in the future.
And he talked about it. He said, when the moment comes, you know it's going to happen, and things get quiet. And he was talking about being in the zone, being in flow. And that's it. You know, you're not even there, and you're doing stuff, and it's so creative. So the thing, he embodied what I talk about, and it's really important: the silence or the stillness, that quiet place within. Joseph Campbell talked about in The Power of Myth. He said when an athlete is in championship form, they're coming from their center, from that quietness, from that silence, and you're not compelled by fear or desire. You're just expressing yourself. But when you come from that space, there's a creativity and there's a wisdom or intuition that comes out of that you don't even know how it's going to manifest. That's what makes it so exciting. When I go back, I'll connect with Dr. J with this. When I was rooming with Julius, it was his junior year, my sophomore year, and he had signed with the ABA, with the Virginia Squires. And after he signed, he had an old Chevy. I forget what kind of Chevy it was. We drove for his first semi-pro game. It was in Port Chester, New York. We were in Amherst, Mass. So we drove to the game, and he's playing against these older guys. They got pop bellies and everything, and they could play. And all of a sudden, I seen him playing, and you got to understand, when he played in the college game, because of Kareem, they outlawed dunking. So you couldn't stuff the ball in a regular game. You could do it in a warm-up, but not in a regular game. So all of a sudden, he has this freedom, and all of those 2 years or whatever it is not being able to dunk, he was making stuff up. And I'm looking at him because I watch him practice every day. We play together and everything. And I'm saying, man, he's making stuff up. He was just in flow. And I laugh, but it's not like he's not trying it, but you can see he was in the zone. He was in the flow, and he was like a a ballet dancer. He was doing it with so much
Wow.
grace, ease, and with power. And so I've been privileged to be able to see him come out. And his first varsity game I saw when his first varsity game, I think he had 32 points and 28 rebounds.
Wow.
He was one of the few at that time. There were 3 players that averaged 20 in points and rebounds in
Wow.
college game.
And
Yeah.
did you know him beforehand, or did you guys did the universe just put you guys together as college roommates?
Yeah, well, we had friends. We used to play pickup together. We used to play ball together and whatnot. And we decided we were gonna all, one of our friends, Herman, was head of residence, so he put us all on the same floor, and he put me and Doc together. And so I had planned on playing for the team, but I got injured, and that was the end of my career. But I still was involved in the team when we had recruits come in and whatnot. I was still involved in it. And then my other roommate, Al Skinner, came. He was a year behind. And he was there, and Rick Pitino was there when I was there. So there were a lot of folks there at UMass when I was there.
And to help a guy like him or Jordan or somebody get in that zone and get everything calm, to have that calm and chaos, is there a breath work that you teach them? Is there another form of mindfulness, like a quick meditation you teach them? Fill me in on that.
Yes, well, there's various approaches to it. There's the Zen approach, there's a TM approach, there's all of these approaches. I tend to focus on just focusing on the breath and breathing, but it's really more about how do you, if you, it's interesting because I'm not really making it up. If you think about the nervous system, you have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So on one side, the left brain, I'm right-handed, so the left brain would be, linear. That's where the fight, flight, freeze happens. And then the right brain is, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, 1 + 1 could equal 6, but it's a nonlinear, and it's what they call a rest and digest. See, so when you're in that, when you're in the parasympathetic, and you have the sympathetic, but the sympathetic dominates. It dominates everything. 1 + 1 = 2. The words of the song, it dominates. And unless you can get into what Herbert Benson called the relaxation response, where you're able to the rest and digest, where you're able to stop this from dominating and let the other side get in, like the melody of the song, the whole picture. So you have to use both sides of your brain, because they're not like 50-50 that, they interact, and there's, it's like those co-joining circles and whatnot. But you have to learn how to self-regulate. You have to learn how to raise your energy, which would be the linear brain, and increase your intensity. And at the same time, you got to be able to lower it. You got to be able to be in that calm, that quiet place. So you need to do both. There's a time. So that self-regulation is like you got to meet the intensity of whatever it is, the challenge you have in front of you. But at the same time, if you do it too fast and you get frenetic, that's not going to get it done either. It's like if you play a string instrument, a guitar or a violin, if the string is too tight, you won't get the right note. And if it's too loose, you won't get the right note. You got to just balance it just right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, actually.
Talking about,
I love that.
So yeah, so it's so the techniques, I have a big tool bag of how I draw on what to do, but really it comes down to how to get you, to understand that you have autonomy to some degree, that you can direct your attention to something, to a thought, to an object. And how do you direct it and sustain the attention? How do you deal with distractions? And how can you stay in the moment and not get pulled back into the past or pushed ahead into the future? You have to be able to be moment to moment, be in the moment, and you got to have strategies, and you have to have the awareness to know, okay, I'm still in the last play that occurred instead of being in the moment. And it's interesting. I was watching this, the NCAAs, and it was fast walking or something. And this woman, she was in front, young lady, she was in front, and she was getting close to the finish line, and she started celebrating. And she started celebrating, the person next to her just won. That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be just fear or frustration. You can get pulled away by elation or joy and lose yourself and focus on how you're doing and not stay focused on what you're doing. So this ability to direct and sustain attention, that's what differentiates geniuses from other people, because they know what to focus on and they know how to sustain it.
Yeah, and you look, that kind of leads in a quote that you have a bunch of quotes I love, but one Really love it. Success is 99% failure. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. Love that.
Yes.
People don't understand the gift that adversity is, but like that woman now, like, yeah, it's guarantee she's going to grow from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's gonna, and and the interesting thing is, it's possible that that little growth, that mistake she made could level her up to win the next 3-4 races.
Right. Exactly. Sucks at the time, but could
Yeah.
really like it sucked for Michael Jordan to get benched in high school at the time, but look what it did for him
Yeah.
forever. Right. So we talked about Jordan. We talked about the Oilers. Tell me about Kobe, working with Kobe and what you were able to
Yeah.
work with him
Kobe,
and what you learned from him.
Yeah. What I learned from Kobe is interesting. Kobe, it's interesting because when I first met him, well, I met him before I worked with him with the Lakers, but when he was at the Lakers, it was 2000. I write about this in my book, The Mindful Athlete, as well as Unlocked. It was one game in 2000, my first year working with them, and Kobe was like, he had this intensity, and it was like he was trying to score 32 points or 35 points in one shot, right? So he was really like really going after it. And if you think about it, let's say he wants to average 32 points, get 32 points that game. So from a linear point of view, you're going to say, oh, 8 times 4, that's 32. So each quarter, I just have to score 8 points. And so the challenge with that is if you only score 4 points in the first quarter, then you go into the second quarter, you feel like you got to
Press.
score 12
Yeah.
and you're pressing. And so what I said to him, I gave him a Zen koan, really. I said, Kobe, the best way to score is not to try to score. Just in other words, I was saying,
Did he
because
look at you like you were crazy when you said it, or did he get it?
yeah, he got it. And as a matter of fact, in 2015, when he invited me to go hang out with him, I asked him about it. He remembered everything. That was amazing. He remembered every damn thing I told him. He has like one of these memories that can retain that stuff. So he had 16 points in the first quarter.
Wow.
And so this is what unlock means. It means that, see, you can be so hyper focused on something that you're just focused on that, and you don't see all the opportunities that are there because you're looking for the opportunity instead of letting the opportunity speak to you. And that's what mindfulness is about: seeing things in new and fresh ways, and staying open but receptive, because the moment is pregnant with possibility. This moment. And so we have to be able to see things in new and different ways and stay open for the possibilities that we might miss because we're looking for something instead of letting the situation communicate to us.
So I hear you told what he learned from you. What did you learn from him being around him?
Well, the same thing I taught him is what I learned him, but what I learned about him was his ability to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And pushing and doing things, and when he, that's where the mama mentality came from. But I had that mentality myself because I do things like that. I lived in a meditation center for 6 years, and still worked and everything. And there was a class that I would attend, and I attended that class for 6 years every Tuesday. I mean, that kind of, people, who does that? And I think about who does what I did, but it was because I was pursuing excellence and wisdom, man. And I didn't even know. It was just an impulse. Like, one of the things that I did was, I'm coming up on 40 years of sobriety, July 30th.
Good for you, man. That's great.
I've averaged over a book a week for those entire 40 years.
Really?
That's what I mean. So that's why we got along, because I had the moment mentality. I just didn't know what to call it. I was just, but I'm intense, right? But I learned that from him, that just being able to share your experience with people, but enjoying, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. He loved working out. He loved learning from his mistakes, which is a growth mindset. What's the lesson? And I was sharing it with somebody the other day. One of his first playoff experiences, he shot like 3 or 4 air balls. And so when he went back home to Newport Beach, I don't know, only Kobe could do this. He called the custodian and told him to open up the gym. And then he shot for like 8 hours.
Wow, really?
Yes. So that's what I'm talking about. So for him, he taught me that tenacity and this ability. If you want something, you go after it, and you don't mind cold calling somebody, because when you want something, you just you just go for it.
Wow.
So he taught me a lot, but it was and for a long time I used to say, well, he's the closest thing to Michael Jordan because I got to work with both of them. But then at some point when he had injured his finger and he changed his shot and he didn't miss a day, that's when I said, Kobe is Kobe. I don't have to compare him to MJ anymore because he earned his stripes.
Yeah.
But it's the adversity. You notice the common thread is overcoming the adversity and choosing to level up from it, choosing to embrace it. So I say no struggle, no swag. So if somebody has swag, they had struggle. You don't get struggle because you got to earn that. You don't get swag by just showing up and saying, okay, everything's cool and easy. No, you got to have some adversity. You got to go through, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Otherwise, you won't get challenged and you won't get, your latent abilities won't express themselves.
Yeah, George, I love this conversation, man. I got two more for you. Shaq's a good friend of mine. Tell me your experience with him.
Oh, Shaq is my guy. Shaq, it would be like when we talk. It's just like he would say to me, one of the first conversations we had. He said, "Do you want me to tell you what you want to hear, or you want the truth?" Does that sound like him or not?
Absolutely.
And I said, "I want the truth." And so we used to have great conversations. And yeah, I mean, he's a very compassionate, generous, and feisty. Like he could, because he used to get beat up. I mean, people don't realize. You talk about all the other big men. I don't know if there's ever been a big man like him where he was getting fouled by 5 guys and they only called foul on 1. Think about it, and so I think the other guys like I think people might have been afraid to foul him or whatever, or they didn't play like that back then, it was, one-on-one or whatever. But when he played, he used to get beat up all the time and he would just tolerate it and dominate.
All right, George, my last question for you, man. I asked every one of my guests this. Give me your unbreakable moment. That moment that should have broken you, could have, and didn't. And as a result, you came through the other side of that tunnel stronger forever. It's exactly what you're talking about. Adversity being a gift. What biggest adversity that made you as strong as you are today?
Yes, dealing with my addiction, obviously, being addicted, and feeling like, I was going to die and that I was destined for jails and institution and death. And I had a strep infection, so I was in a hospital for a week or so, and the doctor was telling me I was going to die unless I changed. And I was a functional substance abuser, so it was April 1st, and one of the guys I used to hang out with, one of my friend Danny, came by my house and took me to an AA meeting. And April Fool's Day took me to an AA meeting. I couldn't even stay in the meeting the whole time, but I didn't think there was a way out until I saw somebody who was just like me, sober and clean. That was the unbreakable. That changed everything.
That's beautiful, man. Really beautiful. I appreciate that, man. I'm so glad you and I connected. So glad we linked up and you're in LA next time. I would love to take you out to dinner, man. Break a little bread.
Yeah, so let's do that because I usually spend about 50 days a year there or right around here.
Fantastic.
So let's talk about it. And we got a lot in common because, I've studied Tai Chi for many years and I've been really, really having that martial artist attitude and, work ethic and the Zen. That's how I got it, the Zen and all that sort of stuff. Like I actually went to Hong Kong back in the 90s. And I felt like I was at home, man, between my meditation, my Tai Chi, being out there doing my Tai Chi and Qigong and stuff. It was like, wow, man, it was really, but I realized that it wasn't just because I was in the Orient. It was because I got to a place where I realized home is where the heart is. Wherever I am, there I am.
Yeah, I love that. I spent the last 2 off seasons in Thailand, same thing.
Okay. That's beautiful out there.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Train in the jungles, man. Oh my God. And that's actually, I learned breath work out there, meditation and gratitude lists. And You're right. That is my happy place because of
Yeah. So
it comes from the inside out. Yeah.
yeah, this Thai forest masters that I learned a lot of meditation from. Actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, I'll tell you real quick before we go, I'll let you go. If I walk in this place, it's called Kamalai. It's in Koh Samui, Thailand, and I'm doing my first ever meditation. Like
Wow.
somebody tried to get me to learn transcendental meditation. I do a lot of work with vets, and I'm a high strung cat, dude, and I'm usually aggressive. And the guy gave me my mantra, and I did it for the first couple times. Then I didn't like it, and he told me, "Well, you can't change it. It chose you," and that wasn't a good answer for me. So I started getting frustrated. Then I wanted to choke out my meditation guy, and so my other friend's like, "You need to learn how to meditate if there's anybody." So I go out there, and we're in this like hut, man, over the Siam Sea, and there's about 8 other people in the class. And this Thai monk who's teaching us breath work looks at me. I'd only been there I got in late the night before. So it was the first time I met with everybody else. And this Thai monk looks at me and he goes, "Ooh, you got to learn how to love yourself up. You got to learn how to give yourself a break." I thought he was talking to someone else. No, he's talking to this poor bastard right here. So it has changed my life, but I've learned it at a later stage and I'm glad I have.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if I could find it. But it's something about, you get to a place and it gets all uncomfortable, you want to give up. And when you get to that place, that wall, where you can't, as we call it bottom, you can't keep going and can't stop. That's when you're going someplace. Now you're getting to the actual work. Because a lot of people stop meditating because they see that their mind is crazy and they say, "Oh, I can't do this." When in actuality, it's not about doing, it's about being. You're seeing how your mind is. And by looking at it from a quantum physics point of view, the observer and the observer are interacting. So when you start to investigate and examine how you're living, you actually change your experience.
Mm.
That's a good one, huh?
Yeah, that's a great one. And I know what you're saying because now that I do meditate, yeah, it was, look, you got my level of ADHD. It's hard to sit there and meditate and unplug and get to that place. But man, when you get there, it's beautiful. I did a 3-day one in Thailand that changed my life. Changed my life.
So let me expand.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Let me expand your definition of meditation. There's a philosopher, 2 of them, I guess, Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. I got my mind on money, money on my mind. That's meditation. See, because to meditate means to contemplate, and to contemplate means to look at repeatedly and look at closely. So we have this idea that we're only meditating with this, but I would suggest that you become what you think about. What you hold in mind manifests, and most of us don't know what we're thinking or what we're holding in mind. So a form of contemplation is you don't have to be silent and quiet. You can just reflect on what you're thinking. What is your self-talk? Is it positive? Is it negative? Mm-hmm. What's on your mind? And I can guarantee you're like probably the rest of us. Have you ever had a conversation with a difficult person and you're having a conversation with them and they're not there?
That's my conversation with myself.
Yes, it's the self-talk. You're telling them how it's going to go wrong and how they're not going to listen to you. And that's exactly what happens when you see them. Yep. So just out of curiosity, try having a conversation where you actually can communicate with each other and your self-talk and see what happens.
So what I do now, tell me if this is along the right lines. So I'll meditate now where I'll only concentrate on the count of my breath, nothing else. So I block everything out, just that, right? So I give everything else a break. Then I'll meditate and I'll just meditate on things I'm grateful for, nothing else. So I usually do it for a song. I'll play a song, so 5 minutes each. And then the last one is things I'm proud of, because it's being proud of yourself. People don't realize you got to practice that. You got to work on it. A lot of people like to put themselves down. A lot of people really, shit all over themselves. You got to practice giving yourself some grace and being proud. Or it's not enough, or people are like, "Oh, it's not enough. I did this, but that person did that," right? So that's my morning meditation every day. Yeah,
you know what I call that practice? Catch yourself with somebody else doing something right. See, that's it. Because but let's talk about it, and I'll leave you with this.
Yeah.
The reptilian brain you know, what it does, its job is to seek out danger. So 9 out of 10 thoughts are going to be negative.
Right.
And so we got to get the positivity. So we got to get the 3-to-1 ratio, 3 positive thoughts or 1 negative thought. And the only way you're going to do that is through gratitude practice, forgiveness, and just focusing on what's right, focusing on what you want. And it's interesting because we don't do that. We're kind of wired to look at, pathology. Our whole society is based on pathology instead of really
Problem
understanding
solving. Yeah. Right.
that they call it the broad and build theory. When you can get yourself at positive, it totally changes everything. And so the gratitude practice, an interesting thing about gratitude practice or being proud, you're reflecting on things that already happened.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not what might happen, it's already happened.
Yeah. 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 So I'm taking away the fear of the unknown, the fear of the future. Yeah. And again, like I said, I spent too many years beating up on myself. So now it's time to fill that jug up.
Well, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you making that
too, man.
transformation, because you know why? Because that's going to ripple into everything you do, and you're going to be modeling what people can do to be at peace.
I appreciate it so much, man. This is fantastic. I'm so looking forward to breaking bread with you, man. And
we're going to hang, brother.
Good, thank you. George Mumford, thank you,
All
man,
right.
for joining us here on the Unbreakable podcast.